Hello and welcome to yet another
Hi,
episode
Jason.
of the CineBeards. Hey Dion!
Hey,
I
Are we
am
allowed to
your
interrupt
hero,
this
Jason Musicanth.
what's your name?
With me today are my two faithful sidekicks, Dion Funheerden
That's me.
and Marcus Knafe.
I'm the Jason Todd of this podcast.
We've also once again found a wandering vagrant, Thomas Marshall Sharp.
I am a vagrant, it's been said.
Hi, Thomas.
Hi.
Marshall Sharp.
Well, I
Yeah,
can't believe
that is my middle name.
Nice.
I can't
Marshall
believe-
Sharp. What's your surname?
Who knows?
It's a weird surname.
It's Hitler.
That sounds Yiddish.
How did you know that?
Are you Jewish? Are you the film industry?
I am. Do you know? Actually, I
Are
am.
you related to the Graham Hollywood?
Yes.
Wow.
We have Hollywood royalty here.
Well, I
That's
do have an
fantastic.
IMDb page.
We're glad we could corner you 3 weeks in a row.
You know,
Yeah, it was great.
I-
Oh,
My-
3 episodes
my
in a row, 2
skit-
weeks in a row.
3 episodes, 2 weeks in a row.
my schedule freed up.
Okay, so today we're gonna ask the question, has cinema gotten worse?
No,
and we're gonna
it
answer it
hasn't. End of-
immediately. No, it hasn't.
End of podcast.
And people who say otherwise are idiots.
Pretty much. I think there's always, I hear the same argument with music. It's just this ridiculous thing of when you look back, and I'm diving into the deep end here, but this is sort of my central thesis always, is that when you look back at history, you look back at the 60s and the 50s, sort of golden era of cinema, all these things. You look back and the films that we study today and that we venerate are the films that got left over. You know, the whole wheat being separated from the chaff thing. And history does that. You forget the duds. You forget the blocks office, like that. Blocks office fops.
If you will.
Yeah, you forget that for every, you know, Gone with the Wind, there were 9 other films showing that nobody remembers. You know, for every classic, there were hundreds or thousands of duds. Now, of course, today, with the means of production, sort of for films being accessible to more people, there are more films being made than ever. But that also means we're in a golden age of indie cinema. So even though there are objectively, just by pure numbers, more bad films being made, there are more good films being made on an average year, which critics love because there's just simply more films and people are getting better at making films. We're studying the films from yesteryear, and while today it might be easy to go to the cinema and go, oh, there's nothing here that's as good as these 10 films that I've randomly selected from the last 40 years.
Because I remember them because my parents loved them.
Yeah, and because they...
None of the movies on at the cinema at the moment are the best films ever made.
Yeah, Citizen Kane isn't showing right
Oh,
now.
Where's my Jurassic Park?
Yeah,
man,
so
Jurassic Park
these things still get made, but we forget that if you're gonna make a list of the top 10 films of all time, most of the time there's gonna be years between them.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
there's gonna be a massive spread.
Yeah,
The only exception being, what was it, 1982, which had Star Wars, Indiana Jones, E.T., Close Encounters of the Third Kind. A lot of movies like.
well,
very
remember,
close
well,
together.
that's all 3 of those
That was
had
an
one thing in
outlier.
common. They were all somehow either made by close associates of Steven Spielberg.
Mr.
Yeah.
Spielberg.
Yeah.
It was his golden era.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that was peak.
I said that's the exception.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
late
very much
70s,
the exception.
Early 80s is
And in fair enough,
Spielberg
like
time.
those are all-time classic films. But every year there are great classic films being made, and because we're lost in the day-to-day of life, you know, you look at it, you're like, oh, Transformers is showing. Films are so shit now, but there have always been films as bad and worse than
Absolutely.
Transformers at any
like-
given moment.
Well, like you said in last week's episode, was it in last week's episode? No,
2 weeks ago,
it
at
wasn't.
least.
It was in the conversation before this.
Oh yeah.
Before this episode, and that's that the angry, disappointed voices are the loudest.
Yeah, always. The dissenting voices are the loudest, the people who want to say everything shit. Because it's so easy to say everything shit. Because any sort of well-reasoned arguments against that are invariably met with, fuck you, it's shit.
You know, or you're an
Yeah.
idiot, you don't know anything. I watched, like you said, Transformers and it was terrible, so everything must be terrible.
Yeah, all
forever.
films
Yeah,
are
film is
terrible
terrible. Look at all the movies that were released this year.
Absolute
It was The Dark
trash.
Tower, Transformers, The Mummy, and those were the only ones released this year.
Yeah, and they're all
no
bad.
other films.
Emoji film. Yeah, so basically what we're doing today Jason, what's our plan?
Our plan is, what I gone and done is, from 2016, I've gone back 10 years a couple of times to get a cross-section of 2016, 2006, 96, 86, and 76. Looked at the top earning movies in those years and the top reviewed movies in those years. To just kind of get a comparison of numbers there, some actual, like, tangible data rather than just opinion on whether or not cinema is categorically getting worse.
Yeah, and that's the thing we also need to remember, just like we need to adjust for inflation, money-wise, if we're looking at box office success, we also need to recognize that there's a certain period of time that passes where films are sort of reviewed more leniently. A lot of the reviews up on Rotten Tomatoes and sites like that are more recent reviews of older films. And there's a sense that as soon as sort of 30 or 40 years pass, that it's difficult for critics to be objective. I see critics being a lot kinder to a film that at the time might have been considered a flop, or that if it was released today would be decimated. But because it was released in the 70s...
The context is different, so you have to view it through a different lens.
And that tends to be a more flattering lens. And yet, despite that adjustment...
Yeah, I mean, the most...
2016 ain't doing bad.
Yeah, like the first thing that I found is when I took the top 10s box office-wise from each of these years, every single one of them had an average score for that top 10 between about 63 and 65.
Yeah,
the
well,
only outlier being 96, which was at 61.9.
Yeah, so let's take a look at that. So we've got 1976, right?
Yeah.
Some of the years, some of the films there. I mean, we obviously had Rocky.
We got
The
Rocky.
first Rocky.
Rocky. I mean, there's a lot of films here that I just have. I really love The Omen.
Yeah.
The Omen is
Yeah.
there.
Omen is great.
There's a King Kong. I don't know which King Kong.
And that is the
76.
worst remake of King Kong.
Yeah,
Alright.
that is the 76.
Is that
remake.
the 98 Godzilla of King Kong?
Yes.
Pretty much.
All right.
Oh dear.
And only one of them got above 70, as far as I can tell. In a Metacritic, I assume MC is Metacritic.
Yes.
Yeah.
that would be-
Only one of them has got higher than 70, and that's All the President's Men, which is on 91%.
Yeah.
63.5% average.
63.5% average, yeah. And now if we compare that from 76, let's go all the way to 2016 just for context.
Yeah.
There, the highest rating that we got for a movie in the top 10 is 78.
Yeah, but there are quite a few in the 70s. There are 3 in the 70s.
Yeah. There are 4 in the 70s, actually.
4. Oh, yeah, that's
Yeah.
4 of them in
including
the
the
70s.
top one.
Including the top one, yeah.
I mean, we've got Civil War at number 1. I'm actually really impressed that Civil War beat Rogue One. Rogue One, Finding Dory, Zootopia, Jungle Book, Secret Life of Pets, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, Deadpool. Those are the 8 films comprising the top 10.
Yeah, I think that's all that's on the list that I can see.
I'm
Actually-
actually surprised by how low Deadpool's Metacritic score is.
Me too.
At 65. I thought it was way better reviewed.
I think
it's
more
far
people
higher
review
on Rotten
Yeah,
Tomatoes.
it's
but
got a
takes
higher, it's
positive
got a
and
higher
negative, but-
approval,
Yeah.
like more people giving it a thumbs up, but that's usually that would be a narrow thumbs up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah. Oh, we should actually probably, because I know we have listeners who probably don't know yet how Rotten Tomatoes works.
Yeah, Rotten
Okay,
Tomatoes doesn't give
inform
films a
them,
score.
please.
Yeah. So Rotten Tomatoes doesn't work on a straight tomatoes.
South African.
Potatoes.
Rotten Tomatoes does not work on a straight scoring system. It doesn't take scores that places have given a film and averages them out. What Rotten Tomatoes does, what Rotten Tomatoes does,
Look how fucking fancy I am.
I'm so fancy. What Rotten Tomatoes does is it takes the percentage score that you see on Rotten Tomatoes is indicative of the percentage of critics that approved, as in reviewed a film positively.
Like if you look at the old
I
Roger
did not know
Ebert
that.
reviews, you know where they gave it a thumbs up or a thumbs down?
Yeah.
It's effectively translating every review into that. And critics, a lot of people think that it's done raw. A lot of critics will actually, they can designate whether this is a fresh or a rotten.
Yeah,
Yes.
they
because for
themselves
some
can
critics,
decide.
because for some critics a 60 might be a fresh review. For some critics 60, because 60 is sort of the tipping point.
Yeah, it's sort of a
But for
mix.
some critics can give a 60% review, but still give it a rotten.
Yes.
Yeah, like a film
Right.
that is technically good, but still
But yeah, but not
unpleasant to watch.
recommended.
So when we say like Thor Ragnarok has a Rotten Tomatoes
Score
of
93.
90%.
93.
93.
Well, it's 93 now, but it's easier to do the math on 90, Jason.
I know, but
On
I'm just
nine-
being pedantic.
On 90%, that means 9 out of 10 reviewers gave it a good rating.
Yeah, they basically 9 out of 10 reviewers said recommended,
Yeah.
thumbs up.
Yeah, so for context with once again Thor Ragnarok, as of this recording, it's got a 93% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes, but its average review score sits at 73.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is still outstanding.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of people feel like Metacritic is, quote, more accurate, unquote. And they see them as just two sites giving film scores, which is not the case at all.
Yeah.
In Rotten Tomatoes, they do actually have the average score. If you look below the approval rating,
Yes, you
in
can see
smaller
the
writing,
average
they show
score,
the average
like
score. But that's
6.74 out of 10 or whatever.
Yeah.
And is that
And-
the Metacritic score that they put?
that it won't. No,
Effectively.
no. Well, it will be close, but it will be just of the reviews that have specifically been submitted to Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
So it might deviate by sort of a decimal point here and there, but it's usually roughly about what the Metacritic score is.
Yeah.
So Metacritic is in many ways a more accurate gauge, but it's also easier to see if you go to Rotten Tomatoes. Like, cool, even though the average rating, if I saw a 70 or a 68, I wouldn't know, like, cool, that's fine, but do they really want me to see this? And then
Is
I
it
might
a
see,
enjoyable film?
yeah, then I might see the Rotten Tomatoes score, and that could be 60 whatever for that same film, and then I know, like, cool, not really that many are recommending it, or it could be 95.
In
And
which
it's
case,
like,
you know, go
cool,
watch.
we're not giving it like amazing scores, but we're saying like this is worth watching.
Yeah.
So, but what we're working with today are specifically Metacritic scores, which are, if one guy gave it 10 out of 10 and one guy gave it 0 out of 10, it got 5 out of 10 and so on.
Yeah. Averages can be influenced and be biased, so let's work with averages.
Yes.
Yay.
So yeah, but I mean, if you look at 1976, the average score of the top 10 was 63.5.
Yeah.
And as I say, you go back to the 70s, people reviewing a film from the 70s today are on average probably, I just see this in general, probably going to give it a higher score than contemporary reviewers, because people tend to be more cynical about new things.
Yes.
And they tend to be
You
more
need
forgiving
a-
of the old. And despite that, the top 10 for this year is higher on average, 64.8.
Yeah.
And it might also be because film reviewers these days are more well informed as to what goes into the making of a film, and all that information is readily available. Hollywood isn't this closely guarded secret,
Yeah.
vault of secrets where no one knows how movies are made, and now you can find out how movies are made on the internet.
Yeah.
So it's harder to say like, oh well, that movie was okay, but that was bad, and you're like, no, they could have easily done that, and here's how.
Yeah.
Why didn't they?
Yeah.
So that makes sense.
Yeah, we have a lot more access to, I think that's another thing as well, is we have a lot more access these days to things like reshoots.
Yes.
Reshoots have always happened. Casablanca had extensive reshoots. Casablanca was apparently a mess.
It was a mess.
Gone with the Wind had reshoots. All these...
Lawrence of Arabia.
Wizard of Oz. All these films had extensive reshoots.
Yeah.
They were non-issues because that's just how films are made. Because
Every
you
movie I've ever worked on has had reshoots.
yeah, which is all of them. Check out his IMDb page. The thing is, reshoots are necessary because no matter how well you script, you're going to film everything, you're going to get back to the editing room, and you're going to realize here you need some more meat, here you didn't realize, but the transition for whatever reason doesn't work. The scene isn't resonating right. Here the performance just isn't what we hoped for. Or you just get new ideas. You look at what's there and you're like, oh my god, wouldn't it be amazing if?
Yeah. Oh, this would be perfect in that scene.
Then you go and you reshoot.
You're not like, oh god, and we can't put it in now because the audience will be mad that we're doing reshoots.
Yeah.
Or something technical happens, like did you hear they've just had a breakthrough with this? We could definitely put this in. It'll be a reshoot, but it'll flow so well. Let's get it in.
I mean, not a reshoot, but a similar sort of a related thing would have been when they were doing Lord of the Rings, and the sort of the technology and the scripting and so on for doing digital fire, like realistic digital fire. Just before that sort of that scene where they're in the mines of Moria.
Yeah.
You know, where Gandalf goes plummeting down. Sorry for the spoilers. And that scene, they were trying to figure out. They were trying to figure out how they do that. How are we going to actually film this? And then, literally, just before they kind of had to like lock it down, like this is the approach we're taking, someone released like a script for whatever 3D software they're using that allowed for sort of realistic digital fire, and they're like, okay, cool, that solved our problem. So these things happen, like technical breakthroughs happen all the time that allow you to achieve things you might not otherwise have been able to.
Exactly.
Less now with computers, I guess.
Well, you know, you were saying like the Avatar thing, that was in recent memory, the way they overlay digital footage with actual live footage being shot.
Yeah.
That is a major step forward.
That was
and
huge.
I
And the fact that
you that a lot of films that came just after that were like, yes, absolutely.
that James Cameron could direct scenes in that film which were taking place on completely CG environments, but he could have pre-renders of it, and he could actually block it within the...
It's no longer just a green screen and you just hope that the actor gets it right.
Yeah.
And then you just animate around them.
So that's great. So there's more tools. I think filmmakers are generally better educated now. They're not. There's a lot to be said for the early days of film. You know, where filmmakers were figuring things out. Oh wow! I mean, if you look at Chaplin's films and you look at some of his innovations, they're incredible.
Yeah.
And you're just like, wow, how the hell did he do that?
And it's all just trial and error.
Yeah, it's trial and error, and there is a lot to be said for that. But that doesn't mean that because people like Chaplin were innovating and they were trying new things and failing and succeeding, that all films made in that era were somehow inherently better than a film that has access to CGI.
No. I mean, look at all of Harryhausen's work with all the miniatures and the compositing of like the foregrounds and the backgrounds, all with stop motion and in some cases claymation. To try and create these historical, mythical epics. Not all of them were great. A lot of people learned from him and took those things, but not all of those movies were great.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure a lot of them have already been forgotten to history, but we only remember Jason and the Argonauts and the original Clash of the Titans.
Yeah.
Because those were the two like standout Harryhausens with the best looking skeletons and everything.
Yeah, those were the ones that worked.
And those are the ones that we ultimately remember.
Yeah.
And that's why it's easy to think like, oh, well, look at when he was making films, everything was so great all the time. I mean, I'm surprised to hear that, the worst Godzilla film came out in the 70s. Because there's...
King Kong.
Sorry. I was comparing it to Godzilla earlier. I was surprised to hear that the worst King Kong film came out in the 70s. But it also kind of makes sense, like... It's this endless thing in Hollywood. It always has been of like, let's make something, remake something. Yeah. Oh, remakes are killing cinema now. For sure.
Oh man.
Interestingly enough, I didn't get all the data, but a lot of the movies that you see on the 1976 list here are remakes of movies from the 40s. I think like 5 or 6 of them are remakes of movies from the 40s.
And that's a big thing that people forget is because people love bashing what's going on now, but people are so unwilling to look at history. Everyone's like, oh, there's such a 80s nostalgia throwback now. Why can't Hollywood make anything original? But in the 80s, everything was about the 50s. Yeah. Everything was remakes of the 50s.
And
it's not like the 70s were full of westerns and stuff.
Yeah, at all.
There's no precedent to that.
Those weren't at all popular.
Who's John Wayne?
Yeah. So there's things are always trends. Films are always reflections of. Sometimes they set them, sometimes they follow them, but they always coincide with trends in society. Nostalgia is always a big thing. It's not like nostalgia is only a big thing now. It happens to be.
Nostalgia's not what it used to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The nostalgia's always, as I say, in the 80s it was all about the 50s. And they're like, oh, this heavy metal and this hard rock and stuff. Oh, the 50s were so much purer with Bill Haley and the start of rock and roll. And then the people
all you need to understand
and
that
soul
is Back
music.
to the Future.
Yeah.
Back to the Future is a perfect photo.
And in the
slice for
fifth,
that.
you know, in the 60s, they were talking about how like, oh, you know, like things were so much better. It wasn't all this Elvis nonsense, and it wasn't all just about sex. And I recently reread Spike Milligan,
Yeah.
the sort of legendary surrealist comic. His
From the Goon Show.
Yeah, I love you, Jay, so much, man. You goodbye. So I love when people like the Goon Show.
The Goon Show is great.
I got a bunch of the old CDs.
Yeah, I do. No, I've got my archive, dude.
Nice.
I'm big on the Goon Show. Sorry. Anyway, so Spike Milligan, I reread his World War II diaries, like his sort of books that he wrote, which are incidentally, they're full of jokes. Everyone thinks they're inaccurate, but his stories about time of like an average soldier during World War II are actually some of the most accurate ones you'll find, because he didn't give a shit about anyway. Like, he didn't give a shit about like protecting the dignity of everyone else, or, you know, like forming part of like a whole narrative. He was just like, this is how it happened.
This is my story.
I'm gonna throw some jokes in here, but like he went and researched the weather. Like the weather is accurate in his
Good Lord.
in his memoirs. They're amazing. And he talks a lot about how he was a trumpet player, and jazz music was for the kids. It was the loud, rambunctious music that the kids played.
It was the rebellious stuff.
Yeah, it was the crazy rebellious stuff, and older people wouldn't let them play jazz in the clubs because it wasn't dignified.
Yeah.
How do we view jazz today?
As awesome.
As, you know, like it's sort of, it's the music of old people, you know?
It's old, it's highbrow, it's...
Yeah, jazz they play on fine music radio.
Yes.
They play some really bad jazz. I mean, I enjoy my share of jazz, but fine music radio, they play some shit jazz. But because it's jazz...
Everyone's like, oh, jazz.
Oh, yeah, let me stroke my beard,
Cool.
So,
Snap.
there's this endless cycle of like, this thing is new, therefore it's bad. The old thing was better. I mean, I remember people reading about people lamenting the fall of soul music in favor of rock and roll. You know, rock and roll's garbage. Soul music was the true music.
And now people are like, oh, pop's horrible.
Pop's horrible.
Oh,
like,
there's no good pop music
where did the rock and roll go? There's
It's not
no
like
good
the
songs.
Beatles.
Yeah, the Beatles and ABBA. What? They weren't pop, were they? Wait, yes, they were.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. So that's a tendency, and people. It's a natural psychological tendency, because people don't want to feel redundant. They don't want to feel that they're replaced. They want to feel like the things I was into, or that I am into, regardless of, you know, them being dated, or there maybe even being better things now that a younger generation's into. Like, I will refuse to acknowledge that, because that means I am somehow obsolete.
My things were the most important and the most influential and the best.
Everything that
and
came before was old and garbage. I kind of respect it.
I pay homage.
But my stuff is the stuff that perfected it, and everything that came after is the shit stuff.
It's all just
It's,
so
it's
derivative.
exactly like driving on the highway. Anyone going slower than you is an idiot, and anyone going faster than you is a madman.
My favorite example of this is actually the Ninja Turtles remake, the Michael Bay one.
Yeah.
I never saw it.
That's the thing, is it doesn't hold up to, say, the first Ninja Turtles film, but it's
damn
miles
better.
ahead of the second
And
one.
the second one, yep.
The second one is and I'm a huge Turtles fan. Like, my whole life, you know, that's like the weightiest nostalgia bomb you can drop on me is the Turtles.
The Turtles, alright.
And I went back and I couldn't make it 20 minutes into that film.
Really?
It is the most grating exercise in pandering to children. Pushing toys.
I remember Secret of the Ooze.
It-
Second.
It was.
Isn't that
it
the
is-
one where they don't use their weapons?
Yes.
I can't
Because
even
of, like,
remember because I didn't
rating-
make it
'cause it was
20.
a rating thing?
Yes, they didn't use their weapons in the second one because of parent outrage.
So that was like, oh, what's become of children's entertainment? The stuff is so outrageous. Whereas our generation is like, oh, those movies are perfect and the Turtles are amazing.
They were not perfect. The third one
No.
was just objectively bad as well.
Yeah, and this, I mean, I couldn't make it through the second one, so I can't really tell you anything past the first 20 minutes. The Michael Bay one obviously has its issues. It has a huge shredder issue that they tried to address because they did the whole
bizarre
whole
reshoot
whitewashing thing, and then
Yeah.
the reshoots.
Yeah, that's not
But if you look at the core of the Turtles,
Oh, they got
The
they got
family
the turtles
unit.
themselves.
the Turtles
correct.
are
They got
perfect.
the
The relationship
between
with
them.
Splinter is perfect. I felt so
perfect.
happy. I ended up watching it on a plane, like 2 or 3 years after it came out. Like, okay, I just watched a documentary on the history of the Ninja Turtle comics. Like, I'm feeling nostalgic. This is all they have. I'm gonna watch this now. I'm ready to be outraged, and it really wasn't that bad. It was
the story itself was paint by numbers.
Yeah, of course, but I mean,
but it's a Michael Bay. You're not gonna get.
Yeah.
Well,
Exactly,
it's also
but the important part they got right, and that was the turtles.
yeah.
And I feel that that's all they really need to get right.
Yeah,
For a Ninja Turtles movie.
My gauge is always, if this was the first film of the Ninja Turtles I watched as a kid, would I love them? Yes. If you watch the Michael Bay reboot as a child, and that was your first exposure to the Ninja Turtles, you'd be like, this is amazing. I am Leonardo, or I am Donatello. That's my one. They absolutely nailed that. Which is one of the things that always makes me so sad about. Sorry, they're always harping on about it, like Batman v Superman. If that was the first time I saw, if that was the first time, because you know there's a kid out there, and this is the first time he's seeing Superman,
and they absolutely hate it.
and you look at it, it's like
I feel so sorry for them because the Superman that they got to see for their first time and the Superman that I saw for my first time, it's two completely different feelings.
And I don't even mind
look at Snyder-Man and feel hope. You look at Snyder-Man and you're like, ooh, that's an angsty fellow.
You're just like, oh, I hope I'm not in a city.
Yeah,
but
that's and it's also like I don't even mind them changing up characters, but you have to make people love the character. If it's a superhero, or you have to just totally reinvent him as a fucking villain, I guess. But the film wants you to believe, you know, he's a beacon of hope.
There's got to be
but they
wonder.
never give you that feeling.
No.
They say it, but they don't show it. So
Got to be a sense of admiration and wonder.
yeah, he
I think
has
at the
to be
core of Superman.
Yeah, he has to be super. He has to be some kind of
He's got to be better than all
hero.
of us.
Yeah, and you got none of that. So any child whose first superhero film is Batman v Superman will think that Batman is a precog and deeply irrational, and that Superman is sulky, hates rescuing people,
Hates it.
and makes really stupid decisions that gets him dead.
Yeah.
Whereas if I watch the Michael Bay, which on my Facebook feed at least got the most hate of any film that year, you know, all the guys who grew up like me on the Turtles were like, oh, this is garbage and they're killing my childhood and all that nonsense. But if I watch that,
Killing my child.
how bad was how flimsy is your childhood
Yeah,
that it can be
wow,
retroactively murdered?
It can be personified and then
Yeah.
murdered.
Well,
but-
already. My childhood died a long time ago.
Yeah.
They killed it with Optimus Prime.
Well, I turned
Well, when
12.
Optimus Prime died, your innocence died with him.
Yes.
I turned.
I was a Transformers kid for the record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I turned
We've
12.
discussed that before.
Yeah.
So yeah, like,
That
but
was
with the
unaired.
Turtles, I would have loved them. So, you know, like you have people like, oh, the Ninja Turtles remake is just such a symptom of how bland and whatever Hollywood is.
There's no more original ideas anymore.
But the worst part is they then caved to those people who were moaning
Yeah.
so much for the sequel, and from what I understand, I haven't seen it, the sequel ended up somehow being qualitatively a lesser film than the first.
I would have to definitely agree with that.
I haven't seen it. From what I heard, it was bad, and I will eventually.
The story was
check it.
worse. The
Yeah.
characters were not as well defined as they were in the first one. Like there was a lot of blurring of the lines between each of the turtles.
That you see, that's the thing, is that's when it falls apart. I mean, people complaining about Megan Fox's April O'Neil. Yes, she was terrible, but April O'Neil has always been a terrible character.
Look, the problem with
It's never been a good character.
the problem with the second Turtles movie is essentially the idea behind your gauge. The first one they made, okay, let's make this cool thing for children to sell them toys.
Yeah.
Which is what you do with kids' movies.
Yeah.
The second one was like, oh shit, we got a lot of backlash from the old fans. Let's try and hedge our bets.
Yeah, and you can't.
that
You can't.
doesn't
Let's
work.
give them Bebop and Rocksteady. That'll shut
everybody
them up.
loves Bebop and Rocksteady.
The thing is, I saw the concept art that they actually had. They were gonna have them in the first one, and the concept art looked amazing because it leaked out, and a lot of people were like, "Oh, I can't believe they didn't do this. This would have saved the film." If they didn't do them right, then I'm not interested.
I can't vouch for how they did them. All I know is, from what I read, they caved to the nostalgia crowd, and ended up making a worse movie.
You have
they
to.
try
The
to hedge
Turtles
their
are.
action.
It's a children's
It's-
franchise.
it's always been
and
for children.
That's the other thing is every
Well, no, it
generation
hasn't always been for
when they start getting into their
No,
their
not in
late
the comic
teens
books.
and then their 20s and their 30s become progressively more convinced that the current things are terrible. Why? Because you're getting older.
And you're starting to
You're getting
feel like
smarter.
you're getting passed up.
Yeah, and the thing is these things come in cycles. So when you're young, it's all fresh.
Yeah.
It's all new. Your brain is exploding with dopamine. Now you're older, it's like I'm feeling jaded.
Yeah.
Which is why one of the incredible things about the MCU is the fact that I can still get, despite being like a cynical bastard, I can still get totally, without any sort of reservations, excited about
If
That's what happened to me
franchise.
with Wonder Woman as well.
Yeah.
That no man's land thing. I was
Yeah.
like a giddy little child.
You
Yeah.
just wanted to win. You wanted to succeed, and you just like
just on that, I realized that last night a week ago,
Yeah.
when the wife and I went to go watch Thor Ragnarok, right? Just sitting in front of us was a woman and her son.
Yeah.
He was like 12, like 10 to 12-ish. I don't know how
Perfect
to judge.
age, yeah.
I don't know how to judge
He
children's
was probably
ages.
43.
He was a
he was a balding
he
man.
had the Benjamin Button disease.
he came in with a cane and everything.
Yeah.
I
But-
think he's about 12.
Bring me my milk of magnesia.
Kids like milk.
That must be a kid.
Oh, you guys. No, but I was sitting there and like I could constantly like notice this kid in the corner of my eye, and what I picked up later in the film is like the things where I was like, yee! He was also going like, yeah. I was like, yes, this is why Marvel movies are great. They give you that sort of that inner child back to you,
Yeah.
and that is the best form of nostalgia when it awakens the child within you without pandering to you.
Yeah, you can't recreate what the Turtles were. That's just going to be my go-to example. You know, with say the original cartoon, because if that cartoon was released today, it would be massacred.
Yes.
The animation is bad. The storylines are weak. I mean, I obviously have a deep love for it,
Yeah. Very, very few of the
but
cartoons we watched growing up would hold up.
yeah,
today.
cartoons
Yeah,
are
X-Men would not. Even though
Cartoons
the
are-
story would. The animation
Yeah,
would not.
cartoons are objectively better in almost every way now.
Yes.
Even your new Mickey Mouse cartoons that I've been seeing, like, are exceptionally good.
Yeah, I'll point to 3 cartoon shows that are currently running that are better than anything we had going as a kid. Steven Universe, which is exceptional. Adventure Time,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which also has an adult audience, and
It's over now, but you can mention it. Gravity Falls.
can I mention Gravity fucking Falls?
Yeah, those are all great shows for kids that are head and shoulders above what we
that-
used to watch as
An
cartoons
adult
in every way.
and I know there's a lot of people now like fuming and like, no, Masters of the Universe. Like, I love it as much as you do,
But it's-
but
look,
you have
look,
to take off the rose tinted
Yeah,
spectacles.
He-Man and She-Ra are both on Netflix, right? I watched a couple of episodes of each of them. The amount of recycled animation and like color swapping and bad, like just cost-saving techniques.
because
that
there was no
obviously-
money for
Well,
cartoons.
there is one animated series that holds up and does stand head and shoulders pretty much above anything that.
Yes, we know the Batman animated
Exactly.
series,
Yeah,
and
no,
it-
absolutely.
You can't. I'm just saying because there are going to be people listening.
Yeah.
who are,
No,
like,
no.
We're
that's in
typing
their
that
head.
right now.
Yeah, no. I absolutely fully agree. That I mean, that's one of those
It's
just
beyond reproach.
incredible things
That's a
where they
rare
manage
lightning in the bottle kind
Yeah,
of.
Yeah.
that's
It
you
was.
don't,
It
and that's
absolutely was.
again that was the product of like creative passion.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
creative
And
They
Passion.
were
It-
constantly
it's
they were
still-
constantly being told by the people who were doing the focus testing with kids. They were constantly being told, no, tone this down, change this, and they were just like, no, we're not
Yeah.
going to. We never, and they never did, and that's why it
And it
helped.
stayed
And,
pure.
yeah, the whole Diniverse really is absolutely magnificent. But the series that Marcus mentioned earlier stand on a similar level.
Yeah. They're
Yeah.
really just good.
Yeah.
I mean, they are. Just go to iTunes right now while you're listening to this and look up Steven Universe podcast. You'll find 17 at least. Look up Adventure Time podcast. You'll find another 18. Gravity Falls. You'll find a similar number.
Gravity Falls, you'll find entire YouTube channels dedicated
Yeah.
to them,
Yeah.
dedicated to it, and like breaking down each episode and looking
Yeah.
at the mystery that gives, and it's
Yeah, and these are adults running these channels that are into these shows, but these shows are inherently for children,
Yeah.
aimed at children, and children love these shows.
Yeah,
from
the
what I
thing is because you
understand.
don't have to pander to children, and
Yeah.
that's what I think people have learned more and more. We're past the whole
children are
Wait,
a lot
80s and
smarter than
90s.
they give
Guys,
them credit
The
for.
80s and 90s, like,
I have a
hey,
question.
kids!
I have a question. How did we drift from all movies getting worse into nostalgia?
No. It's
I think they're
because I
part and
think not
parcel.
because I
Yeah.
think the tendency to say movies are getting worse is nostalgia. Nostalgia is a love of the past that's removed from reality very often. Not always, but very often.
A lot of the
and
time,
people that are nostalgic say about animated shows from the 80s and animated shows from the early 90s. Those are very often people that aren't looking at it in an objective way. They're also not looking at a representative sample
No.
of stuff. Today, you're bombarded with all the new things, and you're bombarded with like, oh, studios are greedy. Studios have always been greedy.
Since the dawn of
What?
time.
A company wants money?
It's
Studios were actually actively greedier in back then because there was
Yeah.
less oversight
Exactly.
and laws
Yeah.
to regulate
And that's
them,
why-
so they could abuse people
That's
more.
why the freaking I read up on that Twilight Zone accident you told me about, like
Yeah.
where the helicopter
Yeah.
fell on a guy.
And it was like,
and
oops.
two children and decapitated two of them and crushed the other one.
Oh well.
Like,
Next episode.
and that was just
nobody faced any kind
no
of...
one faced charges.
Yeah, nobody.
Next episode, I guess we had an indemnity rider.
Yeah.
Too
Well, yeah,
bad.
it was the film, and he was just cut from the film, like his part obviously,
Yeah.
and like that was that basically. That guy, the guy that was behind the decisions, who was telling the helicopter fly lower, that guy's still working today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fine. They've always been greedy. They've always been at. I mean, look at Christopher Lee. They're like, oh, it was such a great era with him playing Dracula. Yeah, it was, but he only liked the first one or two. And after that, he was guilt-tripped endlessly. Like, cool, if you don't do the next one, all those nice people who worked on the film, the crew, are going to be without
Yeah,
jobs.
There's gonna be no
Yeah.
jobs.
And he just constantly got
guilt.
guilt-tripped into coming back. It's film companies have always been evil and greedy. We're just more exposed to it now, and we're also living through it now.
Yeah.
Back then, everything was mediated. It was magazines. There weren't millions of blogs.
No.
There was magazines. So
Back then, you basically just got the final product. You didn't get
Yeah.
to see how the sausages were made.
yeah.
Yeah. You don't get to go into a movie set and watch how it's made. That's secret business.
Yeah. And if you look at, I mean, it's the same thing. I'll keep coming back to the music industry because it's the exact same symptom. Oh, albums were so great then and everything was so great then. Yeah, sure. I mean, there are great classic albums then, but if you just go on freaking Spotify now, you'll find 1,000 bands every bit as good as whatever classic band.
Absolutely. will.
Perhaps not as revolutionary or as culturally significant, but every bit as good because they've taken everything they learned from that band and 1,000 other bands and they've synthesized it and they've made their own new thing.
Exactly.
And there will be so many incredible things.
I think that's an important thing that you mentioned. We look at our nostalgic great series and great movies and great bands because of the cultural significance. And like you were saying earlier, our things haven't had time to generate cultural significance, and they haven't had time. They haven't had 30 years to become classics and to influence and to be great and to be the yardstick that everything else is measured against. So it's just like, here you go. You're out in the world. You're born. Good luck. Everyone's looking at you, hoping that you're as good as everything else has been.
Yeah.
And if you're not, we're gonna tear you to shreds.
Yeah, it's such a good point that films coming out now just have not a... Mad Max is going to be... Mad Max Fury Road is going to be remembered as an all-time, untouchable classic. It's going to be right up there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people
There
love
are
it now.
the thing is, there are so many movies that came out over the past 5 years that you could say that about.
Yeah, but the problem is
There are
people...
so many of them, and
people look at
just
them...
ignore it.
They totally ignore. But 30 years from now, they'll be looking back at like, wow, the 2010s, there was such a great time for film because,
Yeah.
and then they're gonna list 30 or 40 films. But again, they'll be forgetting there was a lot of garbage. And they'll look back at the 80s and they'll list their 30 or 40 films and they'll forget that there was a lot of garbage.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
There will be even better films being made 30 years from now. And there'll be just as much garbage.
Because it's a corporate machine. That's
Yeah.
the end. At the end of the day,
You
filmmaking.
always have people
It's-
who are
yeah,
good at their
it's-
jobs and are passionate about it, who are getting to make films, and you always have people who are after money.
Yeah,
the
it's always
quickest
going to be
shortcut
that
to it.
constant wrestle in the box office between people
between
are making-
between artist filmmakers and what I like to call salaryman filmmakers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're there
Yeah,
to
exactly.
get their paycheck. They are your, like, who's that South African director that made the Butterfly, not the Tooth Fairy movie, and then got hooked up with Michael Bay and did Clash of the Titans.
Oh shit! I know that you're talking about, but
Yeah.
Yeah, but he's
remember.
he's
Case
what
in
it-
point.
Case in point, he's a salaryman filmmaker, whereas
Yeah.
Neil Blomkamp is an artistic
Yeah,
filmmaker.
he's gone
Yeah.
and he started Oates Production. They're
Yeah.
doing those little promos, which are amazing.
Yeah, some
Oh,
of
and
them
they're doing all
really
that
great.
VR cinema stuff now as well.
it's so good.
That Adam thing is rendered in Unity in real time. It's
Yeah.
Crazy.
mind blowing. The things that, and as you said, because of the world we live in today, smaller filmmakers have access to tools that they would never, ever have access to.
How many great, high production quality, incredibly cheaply made indie horror films have we seen over the last few years? So
this
lot.
year,
so
this year
many.
alone has been incredible for horror movies.
Yeah,
cheap,
So-
a
cheap.
resurgence, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just so many that just catch me. I've never heard of it, but I know it's a horror film that was highly regarded from last year. So I grab it, watch it, and it's just like, holy crap, that was amazing. And then there's just another one, and another one, and another one, and another one. They don't have to go through big studio machinery. If you look at student films, like that sort of level
Yeah.
from years ago, look at something like that Trey Parker made when he was in film school, The Cannibal the Musical.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of great jokes, and it's but it's also, it's aged. It's not like something you can go and screen in a cinema necessarily because back then they didn't have access to cheap, good lighting,
Yeah.
sort of HD cameras that could fit in the palm of your hand,
Yeah.
shit like that. It's just so much better for filmmakers now that if you're a good filmmaker but you're not connected in Hollywood, you can still theoretically make
Well,
something
that
great.
actually brings up a good point that a lot of the time what people are complaining about when they say, you know, cinema's getting worse and worse and worse is when they're talking about the big movies that come out in the years. You know, the top 10 box office and shit like that. That's a lot of the time what people are
The
talking
big
about when they
movies,
say...
the ones that are supposed to draw people in.
Yeah, because they're
Yeah,
having
the-
the
the
emoji
studio
movie
films, as they
shoved
were.
in their faces the whole time.
Yeah, exactly, so
But
that's-
that is like aggressively and actively hateful towards its audience.
Yeah, it's terrible, but it's that kind of things also always happen.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
that more now we have Facebook where you're seeing it. We have Twitter where you're seeing it. We have Instagram where you're seeing it, and it's on TV. It's everywhere.
It's in
everywhere
your
you
face
go.
constantly.
It's on the it's on the subway. It's on the billboards. It's fucking everywhere. There's just more ways for them to shove it in your face, but that's got nothing
exactly.
to do
I
with
mean, we're,
cinema
we're
getting
only
worse.
one legislation away from getting push notifications on your phone that are ads.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, pretty much.
Then it's literally you pick up your phone, it's like, go watch the fucking Emoji Movie, you cunt. And they're like, no, fuck you, phone.
Yeah, but if you look at it, it's so rare over the years for the highest rated movies in that given year to be in the top 10 for income. It's a very, very rare thing that that actually happens.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you look here. There's where's the? Oh, I don't really see any overlap here.
There's a bit of overlap in '86 where you've got both Platoon and Aliens,
Man, those
Nice.
which
are
are
good films.
crossovers, which are in both.
And Little Shop of Horrors wasn't a big earner, but that was a great film.
Yeah.
But I mean,
No,
you've
no,
also
no,
got
no,
you've got
yeah.
the top
Really
earner,
entertaining.
which was Top Gun, which has a Metacritic score of 50.
Yeah.
And that's also with time we've gone a lot easier on Top Gun.
Yeah.
Top Gun is
Everybody
iconic.
remembers Top Gun as this iconic, great, Tom Cruise volleyball boys.
Yeah, and if you go
it's
and you look
not
at
a
it as
great
an
movie.
actual, just as an actual film, and you sit down and watch it objectively, and it is not a good movie.
No, not
It's
by
not.
any measure.
The thing is, if you look at the
Crocodile
data that I
Dundee.
put together here, the year with the highest rated number one grossing movie was last year.
Really?
Was 2016.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see that. Captain
With
America: Civil War.
at 75.
Which people backhandedly say like, oh, it's pretty good for a Marvel movie. For a Marvel movie.
It's
a superhero
Well,
movie, I
quite
guess.
clearly, given the Metacritic rating, it's just a pretty good movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you go back and you look, people will say, okay, cool, but go look at the classic westerns with Clint Eastwood, you know? Go look at The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Yes, that's an incredible film, but it
There's
was the
hundreds of
Yeah.
westerns that are absolute trash.
yeah, and it's the same thing with superhero films. The western was the superhero film of its day. It
Yeah.
was the big sort of genre film that they were making sort of sub-genre films in.
Yeah.
That all the big stars started getting into. That all the studios wanted to make.
They even had little crossover universes. I mean,
Yeah.
Clint Eastwood's Man with No Name is in 3 movies as
Yeah.
the same character.
Yeah.
Unheard of with other western, you know.
Yeah,
like,
so it's very much the sort of proto superhero thing. So why is nobody saying The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is good despite being a western, which was the popular thing? But you'll have people saying, well, Civil War is good despite being a superhero
I mean,
film.
we don't have like the hard evidence, but I'm sure that would have been an opinion held by critics.
Very,
at the time.
very likely,
I
but
agree.
not.
Yeah, I would
not-
be willing to
Oh,
put
dude,
money on
critics
that.
absolutely massacred this film. There's a lot of stuff. Bringing back music again. I was recently reading contemporary reviews of Queen albums, and I'm talking like the classic '70s Queen albums,
Like
and
the
how-
first 4.
the best of the best.
Well, the first 7.
Okay.
If you look at stuff like Rolling Stone, who gave, I think it was A Day at the Races, which is probably tied as my favorite Queen
That's up
album.
there for me as
I think
well.
they gave that like half a star or 1 star.
Out of 5, I assume.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, they absolutely
taking
the
the piss?
the critics absolutely fucking hated Queen. Queen is popular with audiences. Well, mainstream audiences,
Yeah.
I mean, like generally Queen were there were obviously outlets that loved them, but especially the British press. The British press love tearing apart whatever's new and current. Now they can't get enough of them, and
And no one will ever be as good as Queen.
we are,
Yeah,
and
well,
nothing's
we
as
lament his
venerated.
loss and-
But at the time, they were absolutely,
absolutely lambasted.
savaged. Yeah. So it's, people now you can't review a Queen album from the '70s now and not give it 4 or 5 stars.
Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm the biggest Queen fan on earth. But I mean, I'll acknowledge that there were a couple of real fucking dud tracks in their discography, but you're not allowed to say it
You can't
because
say
it's older than 30 years.
It's
Let's just take a look.
Which,
I
yeah,
was-
it's the same. Yeah, it is. I mean, I hate to become that guy, but it's absolutely the same thing with video games.
yeah.
It's why the NES Classic did so well, and I'm going to come out and say it. Not all of the games that are on the NES Classic are good.
No,
No,
of course not.
absolutely
They,
not.
a
Like
lot of
they,
them-
they've.
I
think
literally
they had
got-
to try and pad that out a little
I
bit.
got the NES Classic because I fucking love Bubble Bobble, and also because I really love the controller.
Yes.
Like it's again not out of any objective love because my Switch Pro and my PS4 controllers are better, but it's a nostalgia thing. I love it. SNES Classic,
Yeah.
far better balance,
Far better
Yeah,
balance,
far
definitely.
better games.
But also that's the whole thing. Like you can't dare say that unless you're the angry video game nerd who's been
Yeah.
doing this since 2003, 2004. You're not allowed to say an NES game was bad.
Actually, you are, but you could only do it when the SNES Classic came out. I
Oh,
noticed
it's
that
better.
the first time I started reading popular reviews, like widely, that were saying I'd read their opinion once or twice before, but before that it was mostly the NES Classic, these amazing classic games. Get it. from people who were not necessarily affiliated with Nintendo. You know, these were sort of their objective reviews. Those same people, when the SNES came out, they were like, yeah, well, while a lot of the games on the NES were duds, these are all, except for Ghouls and Goblins, or whatever it's called.
Super Ghouls and Ghosts.
Yeah, Ghouls and Ghosts. Like, all of them except that are, like, bona fide classics or just very, very good.
No. Fuck that. Star Fox runs like shit.
Star
Okay?
Fox
It
is-
runs at 15 fucking frames a second. It's
10.
unplayable.
I actually
Really?
tried because
Is it that
Yeah.
bad?
I was so excited to see that Star Fox 2 was coming out. 'Cause I never played Star
Sorry.
Fox.
Do you feel
Sorry.
better?
I am.
No, you are completely right. That's the first. I'm not kidding. That's the first thing I fired up because they said Star Fox 2, the ROM for the
Weight has been
beta.
lifted from you.
The ROM for the beta's been doing the rounds for a couple of years,
Yeah.
but this is like the polished, finished thing. I'm
The-
like, okay, cool. Star Fox 1 passed me by, so I'm gonna play that, and then I get to go on to Star Fox 2. How lucky am
Awesome.
I played Star Fox for probably 5 minutes, and I rage quit. It is so bad.
It is unplayable. The ROM is objectively better because you can force it to run
That
better
human frames.
at a human frame rate.
Oh, so only 24 frames a second.
Yes, because the human eye
That's the
can't see
human eye.
more than that.
Oh, I'm
As an
gonna
Xbox
fucking
owner, I
beat
can
you to
confirm that.
beat you to death.
No, sorry for my outburst.
No,
But,
No,
like,
it's
like-
appreciated.
Well, that's how I mean, it's the same reaction that I have to a lot of films that are considered these sort of unassailable classics. So let's take a look
definitely.
here.
Just
I'm gonna look at 2006, right? Because
yeah, that
2006
was a dip.
are the first films that are old enough on this list that people are like, they're the ones that are sort of going to start within the next 10 years being considered classics. Like, I know a whole generation of people in their early 20s for whom the prequel trilogy is their preferred Star Wars trilogy.
Because
Yes.
that's what they were
Because
first introduced
that's what
to,
they
and
grew
that's
up
how
with.
they met the
and
world.
then when they watched, and they loved them when they were kids, so you've got that nostalgia thing. And then they went and watched the prequels and were like, wow, these look like shit. Like, Mark Hamill can't act. Look
Yeah.
at fucking Alec Guinness phoning it in. You know, look at the terrible lightsaber fights. And they love the prequel trilogy. And they can't understand why
Why
these
it's
grumpy old
venerated.
fat dudes on the internet keep bashing them. Where, like, look how much more slick and good these are. And a lot of them are the people that it's close enough that for them, like, Force Awakens will be their favorite Star Wars.
Yeah.
Because it's like slick like the prequel trilogies, but more so. You know,
And
it's like,
that'll
it's
carry it
more,
forward.
like the stuff that they like, but just heightened a
Yeah,
lot.
just dialed up a little bit.
Yeah. So they like that. So let's take a look at 2006. Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest, #1. Garbage movie. I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
The Da Vinci Code. I don't even. No,
Dan
that's,
Brown is
That's an insult to
a
garbage.
plague on
I
humanity.
fucking hate Dan Brown. I fucking hate the Da Vinci Code. Even though Tom Hanks is objectively
A good
Tom Hanks
actor.
in it.
Oh yeah, and he's also he's enjoying the shit out of himself.
He's
doing
just like,
it.
Yeah. I'm getting so
my
much money for it.
paycheck is enormous.
Ice Age: The Meltdown. Garbage movie.
Yeah.
Casino Royale.
that
A
was
good
actually
Bond
really.
movie.
No, I was
good
gonna say
Bond.
Casino Royale is the
Mads
first. so now-
Mikkelsen as Le Chiffre.
first good film on this. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Night at the Museum, garbage movie.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cars, probably for me the weakest of all the Pixar films.
Yeah.
Cars
it
2
is-
is the weakest. Cars is
Honestly, I
Cars is
prefer
still-
Cars
Haven't they
2.
put out a third one now?
the third one is actually pretty good.
Yeah.
Really?
The thing is, the thing about Cars 1 that I cannot stand is Cars 1 is bland.
Yes.
Cars 2, if you just watch it as like a fun, ridiculous cartoon, it's fine. Like, it's enjoyable.
Yeah.
It's like, it's fast and it's everything. I prefer 2. I know it's a controversial opinion, but I much prefer 2 because 2 entertain me. Number 1 bored the shit out of me, which is unacceptable for a Pixar film as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, absolutely.
X-Men: The Last Stand.
Fuck you, Brett Ratner.
Fuck
I think
you.
that sums it up. Fuck you, Brett Ratner.
Yeah, actually,
he's
just in
he's
general.
part of that now as well.
Mission Impossible
Yep.
3, cool. That's a good
Mission
movie.
Impossible 3 was good.
It was.
No,
it
no,
was-
no.
it
I'm
was
not saying
alright.
great. It's
Yeah.
nothing like 4 and 5.
It
have
was
been.
an acceptable Mission Impossible movie. It did have ScarJo in it.
Well, Mission Impossible
Forgot
1
about that.
was
It
was
totally did. You're right.
objectively
Yeah.
not very good.
Yeah, and we're coming to that because that was in '96.
Even though it had Jean Reno, and I like it.
Superman Returns, I watched it too long ago to have an opinion.
I
Was
That
that
was
rewatched
a really
really
it-
highly
boring one?
underrated one.
Yeah,
What was that
like,
was that the one that was apparently really slow?
It was really slow,
Yeah.
but it
was
did
really slow.
manage to actually kind of capture Superman as being hopeful
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
positive.
I do remember that.
I rewatched it recently. The idea was to, Jason was going to come over and we were going to watch it together, but stuff came up, and I just watched it anyway because I'm an asshole.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I wrote it off when I initially saw it. I was like, what the hell is this, Coming back to it, having a greater understanding of the Superman films that came before, like specifically the Christopher Reeve, I'm going to say trilogy because the fourth one
Quest
is...
for Peace.
Do not mention
Don't
Quest for
mention
Peace.
the war.
Like what the illusions, like just the way that the movie opens is frame for frame the way Donner opened his films, with the text through space, everything. It was a nostalgic love letter towards the Christopher Reeve style of Superman.
And people give it a lot of shit for Superman never throwing a punch in it.
But that's
But
so
that's
great.
That's amazing that
That's
he never
such a
throws
Superman
a punch. That's a
thing to
Superman
do.
thing to do.
Yeah.
Like ultimate restraint in the face of something that could easily just be
There's a scene
neck
where,
snapped.
where Brandon where Brandon Ruth just stands there as Superman and gets shot in the eye and he doesn't flinch.
Yes, I remember the first time
There's
I
some
saw
really
that
good
scene.
shots there.
Actually, I was just like, amazing.
Like
Nice.
like it's going to, a couple of years from now, people are going to rediscover
That's a good point, by the way. I want to come back to that.
I'm
in a
gonna
moment.
rediscover Superman Returns and be
Yeah.
like, oh
It's got a lot wrong with it. Let's
yeah,
not
no,
mince our words
it's
here, but
it has problems. I mean, Kevin Spacey is in it.
We're not
Yeah.
saying it's a great movie. Though.
Yeah.
It's okay. I'm of the age of consent, so I'm not too worried about it. Something that you mentioned that's interesting is that whole idea of rediscovering
Yeah.
films. That is objectively a good thing about time passing. Not the
Yes.
nostalgia, but films that weren't necessarily, that maybe didn't have the marketing budget or that weren't maybe understood by audiences at the time. There's a lot of times where there's a lot of validity in that in a film that wasn't reviewed that well.
Like?
Being rediscovered.
Like something like the original Blade Runner.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Blade Runner.
Yeah,
I mean, even
absolutely.
something that today is, it's something that I've been fascinated for years with is Metropolis.
Yeah,
I
that
love.
1927.
I really
And
like
that's the
Metropolis.
thing is like, when they released that sort of the as complete as we're ever going to get cut,
Yeah.
like I got that immediately.
Yeah, it's really good.
But if you go read contemporary reviews, they're pretty devastating.
They're just like,
a
what
lot of
is
them.
this garbage?
Yeah, they're just like, this is self-indulgent, the characters, and it's not just like, I don't understand what I'm seeing. It's, like thoughtful contemporary criticisms of character, of pacing, of editing.
Everything that we as film critics would.
And
score a
also,
film against.
1927, remember what we said about like, ooh, greedy movie studios, greedy filmmakers? Fritz Lang told his distributors, edit it any way you want so that it makes the most amount of money. That was his instruction to them. Fritz Lang hated the film,
Yeah.
and he told them, just do whatever with it, whatever you want with it, edit it as much as you want, whatever you think is going to make the most money. That was 1927.
Such a scumbag.
So that's the thing is, this has always been around.
This is movies.
This is films.
This is
Yeah.
how
Even
the film
even though
industry-
even though he's a visionary, it took again the whole thing with he had like freaking like orphan children basically in a water pit.
He had
Deliberately
slave
kept
labor,
cold
pretty
for
much.
weeks
Yeah,
for filming.
it's horrifying.
Crazy, like horrible shit that he did. But a great, talented, classic filmmaker. You can be that and money hungry.
Yes.
You
Yes.
can be an amazing perfectionist and also,
And
a
also
whore
want to
for
make
money.
bank.
Yeah, and also want to make bank. There's no
Almost
reason
like
you
people
can't be
can
both.
want two things.
It's
Yeah.
almost like
And-
money is awesome.
And with film, as in music, fans of those things don't want to hear that.
No.
People don't want to hear that Paul McCartney and John Lennon said to each other, "All right, let's ride a swimming pool." You know, like
Yeah.
I want a new pool. Let's write a hit song so that I can get one.
Yeah.
Because
Like,
it sullies it. It's
Yeah.
in your head. All of the things you like are pure and
Yeah.
blameless
and made for your enjoyment.
Yeah, they're not
made
sullied
for me.
by
The money is incidental.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
because they made such a great thing that I love.
because
they
people
made
like
lots of
me
money.
like these things.
Yeah.
It made money, and that's good because it made good, clean money. No,
Yeah.
actually, no.
No.
Distribution
No, you-
deals are horrible. People get screwed out of money. People lose their jobs.
And an
it's
interesting
nasty.
thing that I just saw. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for putting together these. Let's take a look at the average scores of the best rated films of each year. Sorry, in our decade. So 1976, average score of the top 10. Wait, what? Okay, I'm just gonna
Top 10 by
here.
Metacritic.
yeah by Metacritic.
well, by average scores.
By
Because not
average-
all of them were on Metacritic or
Yeah.
available
Okay,
on
fine.
Metacritic.
All right, so I'm going to start that again. All right, so looking at the top 10 by their average score, some of them don't have Metacritic, as you say. But looking at the
Yeah.
averages, all right, we've got 1976 average score
For the top 10
for the top 10
highest reviewed movies of that
best
year.
reviewed films of 1976. The average score is 81. The average score in 1986 is 82.5. Oh shit, films are getting better.
Oh shit! No. Oh
Oh
god.
no.
The argument's falling flat, Jason.
Oh, what?
Dion, backpedal, backpedal.
All
Quickly,
right.
find something negative.
Okay,
to
cool.
say.
Don't worry, 1996 gonna. Oh no, it's worse. It's 84.6. Films are getting better on average.
This is destroying my worldview.
What?
How will I go
Cool.
on?
That's fine. 2006 will say, oh shit, I see Pan's Labyrinth at the top there. We're in deep trouble.
Oh, no.
89.4. Alright, don't worry, 2016, because films are all shit now. Let's take a
Transformers
look.
is garbage.
Oh crap, there's Moonlight, I see La La Land, and it's 93.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So as you can see, purely from the numbers here, they've been getting higher, which means that movies have been getting worse.
Where's some of
That's
And
how
I know the
numbers
first thing
work.
someone's typing
And-
is movie reviews. Oh, critics aren't indicative, right? But then, what other than your own personal taste and very, very limited sample size of things that you consume, like from the 70s and 60s and 80s, is your metric?
Anecdotal evidence is the best evidence, science says.
For sure.
I'm gonna put it in like, for example, La La Land, highly rated movie, right?
Yeah.
93% Metacritic. I did not care for La La Land.
No, I also did not care for
I
La
did
La
not.
Land.
I like the musical aspect of it, but
Yeah.
beyond that, I didn't enjoy
It was
it
a,
as a
no,
film.
it was a badly made musical.
I didn't enjoy it as a
Yeah.
film, though. I
I,
liked the
I
music.
enjoyed it more than I thought I would, but I still wouldn't rate it that highly.
You
No,
see, but this is
Lord,
this
no.
this is where it also comes different. See, Dion and I come from theatrical background.
Yeah, I'm
So-
freaking poison on that stuff.
So yeah, it's just a badly structured musical, guys.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
no, it is
Yeah.
a badly structured musical,
Um,
but I'm not saying whether or not it was good. I'm saying whether or not I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fairness, I mean, what we're doing here is always going to be flawed because there's a lot of films here that are rated really highly, which I did not think much of, and there's a lot of films out there that are rated poorly that I think
Which you
are
enjoy.
absolutely like. I think The Omen, in so many ways, is an absolutely exceptional film.
I agree
I went and
completely.
watched it. It holds up. It is scary as hell. It's unsettling.
It's and in terms of horror, it's right up there with The Exorcist.
Yeah, for
It
sure.
really is, dude.
Just as a
That
not just
moment-
as an influential historical moment or cultural artifact, but just as a film.
Yeah, like I remember as a young man watching it, and the moment where the housekeeper's on the roof saying, "It's all for you, Damien," and then she jumps out the window and
Jesus.
that is the first time I'd ever seen something like that in
Yeah.
a film, and I've like recoiled in horror because oh my god, she's like, you see explosions and death and guns and and suicide implied, but it was horrifying.
And its average
Yeah.
review
Absolutely
score is
horrifying.
62,
yeah,
which is
At the
which is-
time, people didn't care for it.
yeah.
With age,
People
with
didn't care
age,
for
it is-
Metropolis. Yeah, it has been sort of elevated to where it should be. So I'm sure the same sort of thing is going to be happening throughout, but we have no other metric
Yeah.
really other than average critic review scores.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, like going by those average critic review scores, if you just look at the number of movies that are getting above 9 or 9 out of 10 and above, like 90% average review score and up. This movie, we've had something like 13. I
this
mean,
movie.
This
This
year.
year.
This year, we've had something like 13. and that's unprecedented. You know, that is more than it has been in like 30 odd years.
And we are sitting in an age where we are sitting with unprecedented access to knowledge about film, how films are made. If anything, that should be driving review scores down.
It should,
that,
because
we
we're
have the
becoming
most
more critical as
yeah,
an
we have the
audience.
most cynical, critical generation of reviewers. We have reviewers who know all the behind the scenes drama. They have prejudices sort of built in, you know, we're sort of constantly bombarded. So if anything, it should objectively be tougher for a film to do well now.
Yeah.
Critically. Whereas where audiences were sort of easier to please, maybe a little more ignorant of how films are made. There was less sort of film literacy back in the day.
Yeah, there was, because it was just people, like you said, we only got the finished product.
Yeah, and there was also a lot more mediation in like a lot more control from studios over reviewers.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, you want to have a review print of our film, or you want to be invited to the screening, right? You gave a negative review, you're just not invited back next time. You have no other means of...
Yeah, that's it. You're shut out forever.
That's it. Your magazine or your newspaper or whatever, you know, has to play ball with us.
Oh, Hollywood
It's
land
so
is
much
done
more democratized now.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Especially considering
Disney's just done that with LA Times.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, like 2
there's
weeks
that,
ago.
but also what you have to remember is something that's also disappearing, which is also sort of leveling the playing field in terms of reviewers, is review embargoes.
Yeah.
Are getting closer, and in terms of
Right.
film, music releases, and video games, they're all coming like day of release. Is pretty much like when the embargo drops, and a lot of people aren't getting review copies of films or games or anything like that. They have to actually physically, on the day of release, go to the cinema and
Yeah.
watch the film.
And so they're not getting preferential treatment. And
they're
it's
not
a lot
getting
easier.
preferential treatment.
It's a lot easier to gush about something if you've been made to feel special.
Exactly.
Yes.
And, you know, also it's in considering that short time frame as well. And yeah, because you want to obviously get your review out as quickly as possible to get those clicks, to get
Yeah.
those things. It's much quicker and easier. Like when I can pull from my own experience, when I'm negative about something I'm looking at, it comes like that. I can
Yeah.
have that done in half a day.
Oh, it's so much easier being
Yeah.
negative.
It's
Yeah.
Because
If you're
it's easier to
if you're
tear things
trying to
down.
be positive about something, you know, you really think and you want to highlight these are the positives and why these are positives, why these are things to look out for. That takes time to form in a more coherent way.
And the problem is, if you're negative about something, it feels like, to me at least, online, the burden of proof is with someone who liked the thing to prove
To
that
explain
it's
to you
bad.
why
it's
to,
that
to,
argument
to
it's good.
explain that it's
Yeah.
good. Whereas if you think something is good, the burden of proof is on you.
It's that argument that Aaron Eckhart's character in Thank You for Smoking makes. Like, it's
Yeah.
like, I don't have to prove I'm right.
I just have to prove you're wrong.
Yeah,
That is the best thing about
And-
being negative.
yeah.
Man, I love that movie.
Great movie.
I should
So,
really rewatch
In
that.
an age of unprecedented negativity,
I mean,
where
that came out
the
in
lines-
the 70s, right? When movies were better.
Yeah.
Yes,
1972?
the lines
Yeah.
between what's a critic and what's an audience member, it's becoming much more democratic. Critics are generally far more film literate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yet, despite all of that, that all seems to me, in theory, to be a recipe for films getting massacred.
Yeah.
And of course they do. The bad ones
Yeah.
do. I mean, they love it. Like the Emoji Movie and films like that, Geostorm. They love
Pixels.
massacring because
Well, do
Anything
you want
Adam
to hear
Sandler
something
touches.
amazing?
yeah.
Even with movies like Suicide Squad and Batman v Superman and stuff coming out last year and kind of skewing the
Jesus, yeah, Batman v
review
Superman,
Just, like,
44,
driving it
Suicide
down.
Squad,
even with
40.
that, the average review score for every single 2016 movie on Metacritic. That's
Yeah.
every single movie that was released last year. The average review score was around 63.
Sheesh.
And that's with massively negative
Yeah.
anchors weighing down
Yeah.
the average.
And it's not like these bad films are getting a pass.
No.
They are just objectively more good films being made.
Yeah. There are more films being made, and there are more good films than bad films being
Yeah.
made.
because people have just got better at. It's like cars. Go back and look at cars from the 70s. Yeah, sure, you had like this Jaguar and whatever.
The E-Type.
Yeah,
And
you had that was
the Chevy Impala.
yeah, I was
and
definitely the
Dodge
wrong one to
Challenger.
start that. I was definitely the wrong one to start that analogy.
But
you'll have
you're
a
such
couple
a
of
petrol head.
you'll have
Vroom, vroom.
you'll
I
have
know
you'll have
cars.
like your sort of these classic cars that get
Yeah.
remembered, especially ones that got featured in Bond films specifically.
Yeah.
Bond films
Um,
and films starring not Tom Selleck, the other guy.
Burt
what was
Reynolds.
that?
Burt Reynolds.
Yeah.
This is handlebar mustache and
Yep.
justice.
So you'll have those, but in general, the average quality of a car constructed in the 70s was inferior to the average quality of a car constructed now because we've got better at it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
But
It's,
Dion, that
that's-
makes no sense.
yeah, it's just one of those things where cars are objectively better, they run better for longer. Now, I know this seems like a weird analogy to bring up, but if you were to talk to any sort of nostalgic petrol head and you would say like, what's the golden age of cars? They're not going to say now.
No.
They're
I
gonna
mean,
say
this is still the age of the Bugatti
Mechanically-
Veyron and a whole bunch of other incredible.
You said the
supercars.
one car
In terms of technical engineering, this
Yeah.
is the golden age
Yeah.
of cars.
And
Because
20
it's
years
never been
from now,
better.
and
that
20
will be
years
the
from
golden
now,
age of cars.
But,
That'll
but
be
the,
the golden
the
age.
argument against that, though, that a lot of people will bring up, although I don't believe it stands if you look at some of the cars today, is that cars had more style back then.
yeah, no, fair enough.
But
But I
that's
mean,
that's down to like design, and
Yeah.
they were for every Enzo Ferrari designing a car.
There were 30 Ladas.
Yeah, there were 30 Ladas.
yeah, and we don't remember them. We remember the classics, and it's exactly what you said earlier. Not enough time has passed. It's exactly the same thing with film. The average quality of filmmaking has gotten better because the tools have gotten cheaper. It's a more democratic thing. People who are absolutely passionate about film don't have to necessarily sell out their vision to a big, a film studio. They can do a Kickstarter and they can make their amazing passion project.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I guess that kind of wraps it up for us. Like,
Yeah.
with opinions, with data, and
Yeah.
just basically with the power of looking.
And common sense.
I would love, just as a last point, I would love for anyone who still objectively feels film is getting worse all the time, right? Go look at an average year in, say, the 60s or the 70s, right? Go
Pick
look
a year.
at,
In fact, pick your birth year.
yeah, pick your birth year. Go look at just go look at any given month.
Yeah.
The top 20 films of that month. Now go watch those films, right? And go look at the top 20 films of this month and go watch, or top 10. Not everyone has a lot of time, but just go look, and I guarantee you the ones now on average will be better. You might hit Aliens. You might fucking hit gold.
luck out
Of
and just
course.
hit a golden draw.
You might have been born in October of 1982, and
Yeah.
then this argument falls flat.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, well,
But-
it falls flat with like 4 films, but I guarantee you the films they were up against were not
No.
E.T.
Yeah.
There was probably some absolute tripe coming out at that exact same time. But in general, you're more likely to find that any random month that you pick now, the quality of the average film is going to be higher. You're going to find it more watchable, not just because you're a modern audience, but just because the baseline for film production, like the base quality of films, has just got better.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
audiences are more picky.
Yeah.
That is what they know. Like
you can't
saying,
you can't just get away with shit anymore.
No. Like I was watching the the cat from Mythbusters, Adam Sandler.
Yeah. Adam Sandler.
Sorry, Adam Savage.
Adam
Adam
Savage.
Savage.
Oh, that
Excuse
was
me,
savage.
I misspoke.
Yeah.
Terrible tragedy. He is props master in film, and
Yes.
he on his YouTube channel went to the Blade Runner set and the Blade
Oh, I
Runner,
did.
Yeah.
the Blade Runner props, and he was talking to the props master about the quality, because like you look at the gun that's made of rubber and
Yeah.
it is indistinguishable from the gun made with metal, and
Yeah.
he was saying that like, have you found that the technology in film has forced you to up your game in terms of props? He's like, yeah, because everything's shot in 4K now. Everything is shot in 4K raw, and audiences are looking at things with a much more critical eye, and the film and its reading on camera far more closely than ever before.
Yeah.
And so all of those things combined to like props being better, props working better with more practical effects. You can't just CG things in anymore because people go, oh, well, they could have done that with props because I've seen that done with
Yeah.
props.
Like, also on Adam Savage's channel, sorry, I'm just going to pop in here. Ghost in the Shell. You
Yeah.
saw the live action, right?
No.
Okay, but
I'm waiting. I'm waiting to just check it on Blu-ray.
Okay, but
Weta
you...
workshops.
Weta Workshops. You've seen the trailer.
Yeah,
Yes. Okay, so you know the geisha robots that feature in the trailers. 90% of that is practical.
Yeah.
And it's ridiculously intricately complex.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like when you watch the film, you won't believe how that is mostly practical.
Yep. That's pretty amazing. I mean, Mad Max. I mean, that's sort of my go-to example
go-to
of this.
for
Looking at the behind the scenes, and you know, sure there was a lot of CG touching up, but if you just look at the actual raw shots, those stunts being done, those guys are really on those poles.
Yeah, no, like
You know?
talking to people that made the film, you're just like the stories they tell, absolutely mind blowing.
It's
The stuff that
completely
these
staggering.
stuntmen had to do, they couldn't just CG a guy in for the sake of it.
Yeah.
No, you pull off that stunt, we'll be here all day.
Yeah,
We'll
and
get
if
it
you
right.
if you compare it to the stunts from the originals, yeah, sure there was impressive stuff, but they have objectively, by any metric, pushed it further.
Absolutely.
So it's got better.
Yeah, there's better safety gear now, so they
Yeah,
could do more
stuntmen
outlandish
weren't dying.
stunts.
Yeah, and that's another thing. You must never conflate quality, how good something is, with how difficult it was to make.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
You can't say, oh, but it was a lot harder to do this in the 70s, therefore the film is somehow better. No, it's easier to do now, so you can do more. You can make it better. You can make animatronics better. Your props are better.
You can expand. You
Your
can
lighting
overlay,
is
you can
better.
Enhance.
Yes. So in general, films have just got better. Sure, they've got easier, but just because something's difficult doesn't make it better.
I think that's a
Yeah.
nice thing to wrap on there.
Yeah.
So, recommendations for this week. It's a bit of a controversial movie, apparently, but I'm going to recommend going to see Mother.
Oh, I plan to go and watch
Oh, I
Mother.
cannot
Because
wait. I've heard such wildly conflicting things about
Yeah.
that film that
Yeah.
I just cannot.
Yeah.
wait to
we
see
are,
it
we
for
are
myself.
in a golden revival of horror at the moment.
Oh yeah, not just indie, but also Hollywood horror.
This is actually a Jennifer Lawrence movie I want to see.
And I never thought I'd hear
No,
that
I
said
never,
loud.
Nope.
No.
No.
Well, it's because of Aronofsky. I mean, I religiously watch every Aronofsky film.
Nice.
Cool. Dion.
Mine's not an actual film, but it is out on Blu-ray, which is Hans Zimmer live on tour, live in Prague. And as someone who saw it in person twice,
Shut up.
it is beyond imagining how good it is. My only critique, I will say, is that the Blu-ray was shot with the previous tour, so they don't have the Wonder Woman theme, which I am very sad about.
Pre-order
But other than that, it is incredible.
Marcus.
I don't have anything for you to watch right now on Netflix. What I'm gonna tell you is to wait until Friday, because The Punisher will be out. So you have a choice: go watch Justice League on Friday, I guess, with all the plebs, or stay home like a human being and watch some Punisher with your loved ones, and go watch Justice League in the middle of the week when nobody's there to bother you.
When no one can see your shame.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm
Thank
gonna go
you,
in
Thomas.
disguise.
Yeah.
I'm part of the problem.
Yeah.
Thomas,
Any B movies for us this week?
No B movies, but since we talked about smaller films and horror films, I will say a film that I watched recently, which is a horror film in a small production house, a horror film called Transfiguration. Really, really interesting look at a horror movie trope and vampirism in a contextual modern setting. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, sounds
I'll
pretty
check that
good.
out.
Yeah,
Sounds like my
I'll check
favorite
that
too.
out. All right, cool. So that's gonna do it. Plugs, Dion. Do you have anything to plug?
Where specifically? Ayo, shaking it up, but still consistent. You can follow me on Twitter at DionFranHidden1. I'll never tweet, so I'm a safe person to follow.
Marcus.
follow me on Twitter at Viking of Science and check out my YouTube channel Escape from Mount Backlog. November is shooter month, so we're just looking at shooty bang bang games.
Damn.
We've already done Wolfenstein 2, and this past Friday you would have hopefully watched Super Hot. This Friday I think we're going into World War One, and it's not for Battlefield One.
Thomas, anything you want to plug?
No. I mean,
Okay, we'll move right on then.
Go check out his IMDb page.
Please don't. It's deeply embarrassing. I have Twitter. It's at Totalitarian Tom. I tweet this show, Marcus's show, and video game and film news.
Hooray.
Cool. And you can, as always, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Podiant, Twitter. All the links are in the description.
Hey,
below.
how's it going with that with the iTunes thing?
They still haven't gotten back to me, those sons of bitches.
Okay.
Man,
Should have gone through DistroKid.
corporations.
Should have gone through DistroKid. All right.
Let's get some crabbers.
Yes.
Bye.